Argentina's really been going through it, and what we can see as of late with Javier Milei coming into power, being elected to the Pink House, now the president of the country, well, he's balanced a 12-year deficit in just 9 weeks, and this is truly staggering. Makes the people in Washington, D.C. look like nothing more than feckless cowards with no capacity to get anything done, which they most certainly are. I basically just explained to you what a politician is, showing the fact that these people are spineless with no capacity to actually address the bureaucratic bloat within government. But Javier Milei has most certainly taken that chainsaw that he planned to the administrative state within Argentina, and we can see that he is doing great things to assist the people of this country. Let's go ahead, jump in and see what we've got. I've got some complaints and I've got some things that I want to highlight, so let's see what Javier Milei's been up to. I suppose an interesting place to start this would be that of Javier Milei meeting Donald Trump, and this happened at CPAC. And the thing that I find so much of a red flag about this is that Javier Milei is embracing Donald Trump excitedly, and I get why he may be doing it, because Trump being someone who led effectively a populist revolt against the current order within the United States through that of the America First conservative movement. Well, Javier Milei kind of doing the similar thing through that of the libertarian ethos by pushing the standards of libertarianism onto the people of Argentina and using that as a chainsaw to cut through the bureaucratic bloat within their country. The thing is, though, Donald Trump was nothing more than a big money, big government man, and there is no better example of this than how he tackled the crisis of the COVID era and what he thrust upon the people of the United States by pushing for things like, I don't know, 14 days to slow the spread and Project Warp Speed, by allowing people like Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx, as well as Rochelle Walensky, to be those who were dictating the policy that destroyed years of people's lives and decades of prosperity built up by many people who were then having to eat into their savings that are now poor and destitute, all because of the standards visited upon them by big money, big government men akin to Donald Trump and Joe Biden, who absolutely dropped the ball during the COVID crisis. So, this is a major red flag for me, and I would argue should be for many libertarians, but we move on. Now we go here to see. Argentine President Javier Milei has handed over 2 Ukrainian Mi-17 helicopters that the country received from Russia. Additionally, Argentina is planning to hold a Latin American support summit for Ukraine later this year. Another major red flag, the thing that we should always oppose as libertarians, whether it be Americans or Argentinians, is funding foreign conflicts abroad, because if anything, this is anti-libertarian. What we're doing is siphoning away the value of your labor to put it into government resources to send abroad to fund a proxy war. And this is something that people need to realize is absolutely antithetical to the fundamentals of libertarianism. And not only that, Javier Milei is completely acquiescing to the demands of major monolithic institutions akin to that of NATO. And all this does, again, as a libertarian, should throw up the brightest of red flags for the fact that he is pushing to send your tax dollars, the value of your labor, people in Argentina who are already suffering through insane amounts of inflation, and with that record levels of poverty that people in the West truly cannot fathom for the most part because of the devaluation of their dollar, while the dollar itself will only be devalued more as we are siphoning away the value of your labor to send abroad to go fund these conflicts. It is wrong, it is antithetical to the fundamentals of libertarianism, and Javier Milei needs to get his head screwed on straight when it comes to things like this. Now we jump over here to see, from Megatron. New. As Argentina faces a 57% poverty rate, Milei raises his salary 48%. Pause. Let's go ahead and address this real quick. This was something that was actually already reversed. He addressed this and claimed this happened because of an order that was instituted previously from a prior president. So, let's go ahead and address that before we read on the rest of this. Argentina, since the beginning of the year, has become the country with the highest inflation in South America, with over 250%. That is far more than Venezuela. Just a few days after ordering the lower house speaker Martin Menem to reverse his decision together with Vice President Victoria Villarruel, I probably mispronounced that, I'm almost positive I did, to increase the wages of lawmakers by around 30%, Argentine President Javier Milei was forced to announce that he would do the same regarding a pay hike of around 48% he had declared for himself and the members of his cabinet. It was reported in Buenos Aires during the weekend. He denied any involvement, but he himself signed the decree. Now we jump over here to this speech from Javier Milei, and this is another solid moment where he's just delivering the fundamentals and the ideals of liberty, and he's speaking from his heart, and when he does so, he's really singing my clarion call, I must admit. But like I said, just because someone is sitting there singing my siren song doesn't mean I'm not going to look at the red flags that they're throwing up and address them, as we most certainly should. Now, after this speech, let's go ahead and get into an article of Javier Milei addressing the fact of what was going on with that pay raise written by Reason Magazine. Let's go ahead and throw it into the speech and then we'll move on.
Hoy, en la primera apertura de sesiones de nuestra administración, quiero convocar tanto a gobernadores como a expresidentes y líderes de los principales partidos políticos a que depongamos nuestros intereses personales y nos encontremos el próximo 25 de mayo en la provincia de Córdoba para la firma de un nuevo contrato social llamado Pacto de Mayo, un contrato social que establezca los 10 principios del nuevo orden económico argentino. De esta manera, espero que podamos dejar atrás las antinomias del pasado, abandonar las recetas del fracaso y volver, tal como hicieron nuestros padres fundadores hace más de 200 años, a abrazar de una vez y para siempre las ideas de la libertad. Ese Pacto de Mayo tendrá por fin establecer las 10 políticas de Estado que el país necesita para abandonar la senda del fracaso y comenzar a recorrer el camino de la prosperidad. Esas 10 políticas de Estado son: 1. La inviolabilidad de la propiedad privada. 2. El equilibrio fiscal innegociable. 3. La reducción del gasto público a niveles históricos en torno al 25% del PIB. 4. Una reforma tributaria que reduzca la presión impositiva, simplifique la vida de los argentinos y promueva el comercio. 5. Rediscutir la coparticipación federal de impuestos y terminar para siempre con el modelo extorsivo actual. 6. Un compromiso de las provincias de avanzar en la explotación de los recursos naturales del país. 7. Una reforma laboral moderna que promueva el trabajo formal. 8. Una reforma previsional que le dé sustentabilidad al sistema, respete a quienes aportaron y aporte y permita a quienes prefieran suscribirse a un sistema privado de jubilación. 9. Una reforma política estructural que modifique el sistema actual y vuelva a alinear los intereses de los representantes y los representados. 10. Y por último, la apertura del comercio internacional de manera que la Argentina vuelva a ser un protagonista del mercado global. Estas 10 ideas, que son las bases del progreso de cualquier nación, podrán sentar las condiciones del crecimiento argentino por los próximos 100 años, para que una vez más la Argentina sea un faro de luz para Occidente.
Now we jump into this article here from Reason Magazine that I was talking about earlier. Milei gave himself a huge pay raise, then took it back. The president who vowed to cut government spending rescinds the 48% pay raise he gave himself. Argentine President Javier Milei is being accused of increasing his presidential income while pushing massive spending cuts across the government to deal with the country's economic crisis. Reports emerged over the weekend that Milei's monthly salary increased from 4 million pesos, equivalent to $4,700 according to the official exchange rate, in January to slightly over 6 million pesos, or $7,073 in February. The salary hike was also extended to other top government officials. Milei's 48% pay raise sparked outrage among opposition members, especially after the president had promised to bring a chainsaw to the Argentine economy and drastically cut spending. The situation escalated on Monday when Milei fired Labor Secretary Omar Yassin during a live interview with TV channel LN+, claiming that the salary increase was an error that should never have been made. According to the president, the pay increase was an automatic adjustment from a decree signed by former President Cristina Ferdinand de Kirchner 14 years ago. I have just been informed that as a result of a decree signed by former President Kirchner in 2010, which established the political officials should always earn more than public administration employees, an automatic increase was granted to political staff of this government. Don't you worry, this gets a little more interesting. We go down a little further and we see, even former President Kirchner responded to the accusation by saying that the decree she signed years ago has nothing to do with the salary scandal. Admit that you signed, you got paid, and got caught, she wrote. Milei won the presidential election last year, promising to shock Argentina's economy to end its economic crisis. He promised to dollarize the economy, abolish the central bank, and drastically cut government spending. Just 2 days before the scandal, the president's party, La Libertad Avanza, announced a bill revising a proposed salary increase of around 30% for deputies and senators. Milei rallied against the raise, which has been approved in late February by Vice President Victoria Villarreal and Lower House Leader Martin Menem. I don't agree with the salary raise. I understand that they might have needs, but 60% of Argentines are poor and 10% are destitute, Milei said on Ellen Plus on Thursday. So here you can see him claiming that this was not intended. The former president saying, well, this is something that you got caught doing. This was not something my administration put into play. And because of that, you need to own it. So maybe this is very much what he's doing and he's owning it. And it's quite fascinating to see how this unfolded. It wouldn't be the first time a politician has completely defied the standards of what they put forward, completely avoiding what is best for their citizenry and doing what is best for them. But nonetheless, we move on now to another article from Reason Magazine. Milei closes state news agency TLAM for spreading propaganda. It is immoral that in a poor country like ours, the Argentine president said, the government spends the people's money to buy the will of journalists. And yes, I absolutely agree. And if this had happened after what we saw with Milei being attacked by the media for what is going on with, well, his actions that were effectively raising his standard of living while lowering others, that would have been something that was very, very much a glowing red flag. But that did not happen. This coming out on March 4th, and what we see with this article here from Reason Magazine, this happened March 14th. 10 days later, so there is no corollary here specifically, but if this had happened afterwards, you could certainly see how the narrative would be spinning around this. Now we jump over here to the Business Times. Argentina's Milei says shutting down central bank is a non-negotiable matter. And what this reminds me of is specifically this part right here from this article from Reason Magazine. Milei won the presidential election last year by promising to shock Argentina's economy to end its economic crisis. He promised to dollarize the economy, abolish the central bank, and drastically cut government spending. And now we jump here to see Argentina's Milei says shutting down central bank is a non-negotiable matter. Now we jump to Breitbart and see Argentina says Milei will introduce a bill jailing anyone who orders the central bank to print money to cover the deficit. Oh my gosh. Wish we had something like that here. We jump now over here to the AP. Argentina's inflation slows for a second month as President Milei keeps pushing austerity measures. So through the process of austerity, we have been able to see the inflation rate diminish drastically. And in doing so, the markets have reacted positively to Argentina. And here we see from The Economist, after 100 brutal days, Javier Milei has markets believing. Argentines have not given up on him either. And well, it appears that if the markets haven't given up on him and neither have the people of his country, that is something that many people should be turning their heads to pay attention to and realizing that we very well may have a way out of our detrimental debt spiral that we have here in, well, the United States of America. And here we jump over here to Professor Peter St. Onge's Substack. Javier Milei ended a DC-sized deficit in 9 weeks. Argentina's Javier Milei is racking up some solid wins with the fiscal basket case seeing its first monthly budget surplus in 12 years. Apparently, it took Milei just 9.5 weeks to balance a budget that was projected at 5% of GDP under the previous government. In U.S. terms, he turned a $1.2 trillion annual deficit into a $400 billion surplus in 9.5 weeks. How did he do it? Easy. He cut a host of central government agency budgets by 50% while slashing crony contracts and activist handouts. For perspective, if you cut the entirety of Washington's budget by 50%, you'd save a fast $3 trillion and start paying off the national debt. It turns out it can be done, and the world doesn't actually collapse into chaos when it happens. Milei making fast progress. Deficits aren't the only win Milei logged. He slashed crony regulation, got rid of currency controls, and he recently slashed rent prices by removing controls that actually led to a doubling of apartments for a rent in Buenos Aires by slashing rent costs. Unfortunately, it's not all smooth sailing. A bill to privatize corrupt state-owned companies to effectively de-Sovietize the Argentine economy was blocked by the socialist opposition who served the government unions who would lose their jobs. Meanwhile, a major Milei reform to make it a lot easier to hire people but would hurt unions was struck down by a high court who said it has to go through Congress. Having said, for the average Argentinian, these are deck chairs on the Titanic compared to the elephant in the economy, Argentina's hyperinflation. Just last week, the monthly inflation figure came in at 20.6% on the month. That was a lot better than the outgoing government, but it still left a year-on-year inflation at 254%. Why so high? Partly because Milei had to free up the exchange rate to smooth the path of dollarization for Argentina adopting the US dollar instead of the local confetti, but mostly because the rivers of money printed by the previous socialists continue to run through the battered ruins they left of Argentina's economy. After all, Milei's only been in office for 2 months. Argentina's dollarization. Milei's reforms will continue to be trench warfare, but his inflation progress is going to be key to retaining support. He just notched a big win with the deficit, but it only stops the bleeding. The patient is still on life support. To fully kill Argentina's hyperinflation, Milei would need to make real progress on the dollarization. Or, dare we dream, a gold standard. On dollarization, that would involve announcing a months-long window for peso assets to be revalued in dollars. He's been preparing the groundwork so far. The currency controls and deficits are a big help, and he's surely motivated to do it since dollarization in other countries like it did in Ecuador has 90% public support. But it is a complicated process, and if done badly, he'll be dead in the water. The stakes are high, and not just for Argentina. If Milei succeeds, he'll be a model for the radically shrinking government in other countries in Latin America, in the rest of the world, and even for our spineless goblins in Washington. Another phenomenal Substack article from Peter St. Onge, truly cannot recommend it enough. If you are not following him, link in the description down below. Go ahead, subscribe to his email list. He has some of the best data that gets put out and commentary on what's going on in the economic, landscape, let's say. And I would argue that if you want to know what's going on in places like Argentina with their monetary policy, you want to know what's going on in the United States with our endless spending and how it's affecting the deficit and what's going on with the trillions of dollars of debt that we have, well, Peter St. Onge is truly one of the best voices out there, and I cannot recommend him enough. And also, I would say one of the best voices at the Mises Institute itself. So, to close this out, let's go ahead and highlight something that at first I thought was a bit of a red flag, but after looking into it a little bit further, I realized not as big of a deal as I thought, only for the fact that we are restricting language in government documents, specifically around curtailing the nature of using words as a power game rather than actually making them have meaning. Here we see from CNN, Argentina's Milei bans gender-inclusive language in official documents. And when you see that at first, it's like, whoa, banning language. That's completely unlibertarian. That's detached from free speech. This is removed from what it means to live in a free society. And then you go on and you look a little further and you go to places like the Telegraph, and here you see Javier Milei bans Marxist gender-neutral language in government documents. Argentine president's latest broadside at woke culture is a diversion from economic woes, claim opponents. And yes, it absolutely is, but his goal is to excommunicate the socialist rot from within the Argentine government, and this is one way that he sees that he can do so. So you can understand why the standard is being pushed. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Thank you for watching. If you got this far, thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Stay lovely, stay great. Tell someone you love them.